In the hours after 95-year-old Nazi Jakiw Palij was strapped to a gurney outside his home in Jackson Heights, Queens, and deported to Germany last week, one of the world's foremost Nazi hunters began to receive tips that there could be more elderly henchmen of Adolf Hitler lurking in the U.S. Efraim Zuroff, the Brooklyn-born director of the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Jerusalem, is now busy chasing down what he called credible information about two other Nazi collaborators from Germany living openly in Florida and Hawaii. It was immediate, Zuroff, 70, told the Post. As soon as the news hit about Palij, I got calls from people who suddenly realized that their neighbors might be Nazis. There are a lot of Nazis out there who were born after 1920 and are still alive. People without a conscience seem to live longer. Zuroff, who has been hunting Nazis since 1978, estimates that some 10,000 Nazi collaborators entered the U.S. illegally after the Second World War, and there may be hundreds still scattered around the world, with most of them living in Austria and Germany. In addition to Palij, Michael Karkoc, a 99-year-old resident of Minneapolis, has been accused of collaborating with the Third Reich. Karkoc allegedly commanded a faction of the Ukrainian Self Defense Legion when the group raided the Polish village of Chlaniow in 1944, murdering 44 civilians. Poland has issued an arrest warrant for Karkoc and is actively seeking his extradition. His family denies that he was involved in any war crimes. There were hundreds of thousands of perpetrators of Nazi crimes, and the vast majority never left Europe, said Eli Rosenbaum, director of the Department of Justice's Human Rights and Special Prosecutions section, the Nazi hunting agency responsible for investigating Palij and removing him from the U.S. According to Rosenbaum, the Palij case was a Herculean effort that took hundreds of hours of research and nearly 2 decades to accomplish, in cooperation with various federal agencies. Palij admitted to the Justice Department in 2001 that he was trained at the Trawniki site in Nazi-occupied Poland, which served as both a concentration camp and boot camp for the SS, the black uniformed paramilitary units of the Nazi Party, and the most ruthless organization in the Third Reich. On November 3, 1943, some 6,000 Jewish men, women, and children were shot to death at the camp, one of the largest single massacres of the Holocaust. By helping to prevent the escape of these prisoners during his service at Trawniki, Palij played an indispensable role in ensuring that they later met their tragic fate at the hands of the Nazis, according to a Dodge statement. Like most of the Nazis who entered the U.S. following the war, including 17 others who had trained at Trawniki, Palij posed as a refugee and concealed his Nazi past from U.S. immigration authorities. They began prosecuting him in 2002 after Rosenbaum and his team found him living a quiet life in Queens. Palij was placed in immigration removal proceedings in 2003, a legal process that ended only last week. Many of the other suspected Nazis who trained at Trawniki died before they could be prosecuted. Others lost their U.S. citizenship and were eventually deported. The most infamous members of the Trawniki crew included John Ivan Demjanjuk, who went on to become an auto worker in Ohio. He was deported to Germany to stand trial in 2009 on charges that he was an accessory to murder at the Sobibor death camp, also in Nazi-occupied Poland, where he'd worked as a guard and was known as Ivan the Terrible. 2 years later, a German criminal court convicted him as an accessory in the murder of 27,900 people, one count for each person who died at Sobibor. Although Germany was quick to accept Jakiw, the country was reluctant to take in Palij. It was only after vigorous lobbying and pressure from Richard Grenell, the U.S. ambassador in Berlin, that Germany finally agreed to accept Palij. It's not clear that Palij will actually be prosecuted, since German authorities halted their investigation of him in 2016, citing a lack of evidence. "We brought it up very regularly, and as loudly as we could," Grenell said at a press conference last week. "Regardless of what the issue was, we brought up this case. Whatever happens in Germany, Palij's removal is a milestone," Nazi hunters say. Palij's return to Germany is a landmark victory in the U.S. government's decades-long quest to achieve a measure of justice and accountability on behalf of the victims of Nazi inhumanity, Rosenbaum said. Other New York residents with ties to Trawniki, Jaroslaw Belaniuk of Douglaston, Queens, Jack Reimer of Carmel and Mikhailo Vasilek of upstate New York, were previously ordered deported but died while they waited for other countries to take them in. Reimer was questioned by the Department of Justice in 1992 and admitted that he led a platoon of men to take part in a mass shooting of Jews who had been placed in a pit, awaiting their execution, Rosenbaum said. Neither Rosenbaum nor Zuroff distinguish between high-level Nazis and their underlings. The foot soldiers and the concentration camp guards who claimed they were just following orders were active participants in the murder of 6 million Jews. Both men saw why. "Anyone who is alive today is more a trigger puller than anything else," said Rosenbaum. He has been chasing Nazis since arriving at the Dodge as a summer intern in 1979, going on to work on the investigation into notorious Auschwitz death camp Dr. Joseph Mengele, who died in Brazil in 1979. Born in Manhattan and raised on Long Island, Rosenbaum told the Post that he is simply continuing the wartime work of his father, a first-generation German immigrant who was among the U.S. soldiers to liberate the Dachau death camp in 1945. "He tried to speak about what he saw, but he couldn't," said Rosenbaum, who was 14 when his father tried to tell him about the camp. He saw prisoners dying in front of him because they couldn't handle the food that the American soldiers gave them. He had tears in his eyes. After the war, Irving Rosenbaum continued to work for the U.S. Army interviewing high-level Nazi collaborators, including Leni Riefenstahl, who directed Nazi propaganda films. For his part, Zuroff says he started hunting Nazis after completing a PhD in European history in Jerusalem. Born in Manhattan to Orthodox Jews of Lithuanian origin, he was named after an uncle who was murdered by the Nazis in Vilnius, Lithuania. "When you give a person a name, it has an impact," said Zuroff, who worked as a historian at the Wiesenthal Center in Los Angeles before a stint with the Department of Justice in Washington, and his current work as director of the Wiesenthal Center. Zuroff says he suggested opening a Nazi hunting office in Israel because it was the only country where he could gain access to Red Cross files that listed millions of Second World War refugees, among them fleeing Nazis. Israel was the only place where you didn't have to be next of kin to open the files, he said, adding that he helped track down Herbert Heim, an Austrian SS doctor living in hiding in Egypt. But Heim died in 1992, before Zuroff could bring him to justice. Now he's not taking any more chances with an elderly population of Nazis. In Germany, Zuroff recently tracked down 3 suspected members of Adolf Hitler's mobile killing units, known as the Einsatzgruppen, suspected of participating in the largest single massacre of Jews at Babi Yar on the outskirts of Kiev, Ukraine. From September 29 to September 30, 1941, the members of the Einsatzgruppen's Unit C shot and killed nearly 34,000 people at Babi Yar. After combing files with more than 1,000 names of death squad members, Zuroff's investigation currently focuses on former SS Corporal Wilhelm Karl Friedrich Hofmeister, now 95, Kurt Gosdeck, 94, and Herbert Waller, 96. German prosecutors are investigating the men, though they deny participating in the Babi Yar massacre. All of the men currently live in Germany and are being probed under a new legal standard under which anyone who helped the Nazis can be convicted as an accessory to mass murder, as in Demjanjik's case. Zuroff believes that there could be many more members in countries such as Ukraine, Lithuania, Romania, and Hungary. We are continuing the search because the most dramatic part of our work is life expectancy, Zuroff said. I'm the only Jew in the world who prays for the good health of Nazis.